Just checking my microphone here. Nope. Checking my microphone here. All right. Check, check. All right. Mm-hmm. Good morning. All right. I don't know where everyone else is, but I guess it starts in 5 minutes. So I'm just going to mute myself so you don't hear all the random clicking and stuff. Recording. Last time around, you guys did a great job on this. Nice. I got a whole bunch of, and I'm hoping I'm not muted still. We got a whole bunch of posts from you guys for at least for the first exercise. So fantastic. So, I mean, my grad students last time, they started getting a little lazier after with a bit of time. I'm going to randomly, we're going to look at some of these in a second. I'm going to randomly choose, some subset of people or some subset of designs. Either you can type chat about it if you don't want to talk out loud, or you can just unmute your mic and say what you were thinking, that sort of thing. The point, and we'll get into a whole bunch of these things. We looked at visualization critiques, which are something you just need practice with doing. And depending on the term, depending on the situation, sometimes you get more or less practice. So last term for my grad class, I didn't give them enough practice and I got it was user friendly. No. I want you guys to be able to critically evaluate something so that you critically evaluate yourself later. I'd also like to see if I might improvise a slide in here in a second as well about how one brainstorms and how some suggestions for collaboration. So, but we also looked at marks and channels, and I'll briefly go over those again today. The idea that we need a design language for describing what, when we want to represent data visually, how do we represent it? What kind of symbol, what kind of drawing are we going to use? What kind of mark, essentially? And then how do we manipulate that mark to give us different effects, to encode data in different ways? So a scatter plot can use a position for a scatter plot has dots or points for the marks. And then the position of those dots tells you a piece of information. And then the color of the dot tells you a piece of information. And then the size of the dot tells you a piece of information. You could change the shape of the dot and tell you a piece of information. They're all channels. What we're going to find out is it's not that easy because oftentimes the channels are not contradictory, but you can't have both at the same time. So you have to make a choice. And ultimately, that's what we do here. Ultimately, that's the job of the designer here is you need to understand the data, understand what's important about the data, understand how they're dealing with the data. So be a scientist, be a computer scientist, be it a statistician, and then know what tools to use to bring out the best in people. So that's what we're talking about, critiques and marks and channels. It is, if you are doing a critique, you should be able to evaluate what other people did, the choices they made, and whether they were good choices or they're suboptimal. And so being able to evaluate how other people did it based off of that same similar design language. Marks and channels gives you one part of our design language that we're going to be dealing with. What we're going to be dealing with later on today is the plan for the lab today is somewhat improvised, not improvised, but about 2 days ago, I re-looked at the schedule again and went, oh, I'm a week ahead of myself. I was planning on talking about D3 and Vega Lite and all this kind of stuff, and then realized it's about Tableau because it's going to help you with homework 2. Homework 2 has some Tableau, not much, and I'm more than happy and willing. My plan is at least to do a quick Tableau demo just to show you how all of these pieces fit together and what we're looking at, and then give you time to work on your homework, right? You guys, I know you guys don't have a lot of time. And we have this lab period. Why not squeeze that in there? Or at least give you some of that. Now, next week's lab period will be an exercise that is not the homework, but it's an exercise, not the homework, to help you with the homework. And I can give the answer to that particular lab exercise. So that way you can look at the solutions and for the lab and just go from there. So that is what the lab this week and next week are. This week, Tableau, next week, D3, and the basics in JavaScript and HTML, just to give you more experience. I know you have some, but just to give you more of a background. I'm reading your P1. I'm in the midst of P1, getting everyone's feedback. I got very, very excited. The first couple I read were like, holy crap, that's fantastic. And then the third one was, not as fantastic, but that's still fine. I want to point out a couple things about the project. So I'm not sure if I have the ability. I don't have the ability to do that. I'm going to have to count on my fingers or something like that. I could jump unless I have a whiteboard here, but I can't mark on the screen. So here is, I can chat. I can type in the chat though. So here's what we have for any of our projects. Number one, while we're talking about projects, if you're not arguing, that's not, disagreeing is probably the better term. If you're not disagreeing, you're not doing your job. If you're not disagreeing, you're not dealing with something interesting enough to cause a disagreement. If everyone just is a complete lockstep the entire time, you're not biting off an interesting enough project. If it's obvious that it should be a scatter plot, you're not learning anything. I don't want you doing that project. That's boring as hell, right? So if you are disagreeing, not being a jerk, you disagree about the ideas, not the people. I unfortunately had for the very first time last term a group that really didn't get along, and they let it fester. They bottled up their emotions. They let it consume them. And then they started getting all this internal politics and stuff. I've never seen anything like that in my life before. Normally you might have one person that doesn't pull their weight. The other people complain about it. And I say, yep, I know. And then I remind them that we have a scale factor on all your assignments. So at the end of term, if your partners, the people working with you, hate you because you're not pulling your weight, and they document why you didn't pull your weight. Like I had one term where they were using GitHub, and they have a record of every single commit every single person has ever done on GitHub. And you could clearly see that 2 people did all the work. The other 2 people did nothing. And they were claiming that they were programming, or they were all pulling their weight and stuff like that. And the other 2 were like, oh, hell no, they did nothing. We did everything. Look at the commits. This is us making all these changes in the documents. We did all of this work. They documented it. And I went, and they're scaled down, right? They went, I think, a full 2-letter grade scale down. That was an extreme case. But if you were a group of 3 and 2 people do all the work, 1 person does nothing, and I have had that before, I'm grading essentially, your grade at the end should look like a group of 2, and the third person doesn't, they still get a grade. They still get some benefit of doing this. They don't get a 0, but they don't get the same grade the other people do. I will say the size of the group scales my standards. So if you have a 5-person group, I'm expecting some beautiful, beautiful work, right? I'm expecting you have 5 people doing one project. I'm expecting some wondrous stuff. And if you only have 1 programmer in a group of 5 people, no, get some more programmers, even if they're not the best programmers in the world. Get some, like give them a small task that they, that's not impacting your stuff, whatever the case is. That's where the bottleneck is going to be. If you have a group of 3 people, the standard for how you're being graded is lower. Why? Because there's 3 people. You have almost half the amount of person power on any of your projects. And so it's hard to quantify. I cannot say like it's this percent, but I know a 30-person group when I see it. And if they're doing the same amount of work as a 5-person group, they should get a higher mark. There's 3 people in the group. Okay. So my P1 feedback, assume you will argue. Grade scale size, fine. That's not really a piece of feedback, really. 3. Oh, that's what I wanted to go with. That. All right. So here's our different rules. Assume your group's going to argue. Well, you already talked about that one. We're going to grade by scale. That's fine. So depending on the size of the group, if you're a group of 5, be aware that I'm expecting a bit more from you. If you're brainstorming, this is the weird thing. There was even a research talk about this from a candidate that was applying for here, and she went over this and went, "Oh yeah, I forgot to keep on bringing that up with my students." When you talk about creativity, when you talk about environments where real creativity pops out, there are some commonalities when people study it. And one of those commonalities is when you're in the process, and we'll talk about this when we do ideation, when you're in the process of creating an idea, when you're in the process of coming up with something, there should be no dumb ideas. And I know you people will still say, well, I felt like I was going to be, yeah, but some of the best ideas I've ever had came from just stupid comments at first from me. And then I went, whoa, there's something here, right? There is something for you to have that idea. There is something there. And the idea is you want to just let it flow, like just let it all come out. After you take the ideas, then start ripping them apart. But don't rip them apart a priori. Don't rip them apart in advance. What you want is throw out the idea because you don't know if somebody goes, well, what about this if we put this, this, and this together? And suddenly it becomes a fantastic idea. One of my favorite ideas, and I think I'm the only person that thinks it's the, my favorite idea. It's not everywhere else is as excited as I am about this idea, but other people have done something similar in other projects of mine. It was us brainstorming a whole bunch of different data sets, and finally, at some point in time, I said, "Well, I had a problem with a party recently, like 6 months ago, where one person, chose all the music for the party." It pissed everyone off because the person put 2 days worth of music in a playlist, and it was like Cool and Gang Celebrate. It was just bad. And we came in and actually changed his music. I think I mentioned this to you guys before. That came from just brainstorming and throwing out stupid ideas, and me just throwing that out there and went, wait, well, I don't know how you can do a visualization for that. And then talked a bit more. And then suddenly it sort of gelled how you can have everyone choose music for a party. But that took a number of refinements, and it's a dumb idea at first until you refined it. So keep it, no judgments at first, then judge afterwards. Don't worry, I'll judge your stuff. You should judge your stuff as well. That should be another rule. There we go. If you don't judge your stuff, I will. There you go. Because if you throw something out there hoping I'm going to fall for it, I normally don't. So you should afterwards, when you're being critical about it, be extra critical. That's fine. This is not a software development course. So if something is not properly implemented at the end because you can't figure it out, just let me know. That's fine. But if you try and pull the wool over my eyes, you just say like, I put some random data together on the screen and it's fine. I'm going to be like, no, hell no. It serves a purpose. Okay, so afterwards, when you're refining, then you judge the idea. You don't judge the person, right? Bob's idea might be not the best in the world, but you don't say, Bob, you suck. You say, I think this idea, it's a fine idea, but I think this one has more promise in terms of getting an A in the class or whatever the case is. Or it's probably going to get us more excited over the term. And the rules, what I was asking for in specifics for project one, those rules are to keep you sane. Because although you can say, I think we'll get along until you have some kind of form, some kind of ground framework in order to base your discussions off of, what you're going to have is, I think we're going to get along until it's the idea I really like and everyone else hates. And then either you have a rule or you have an argument and you have a screaming match. If you think your idea is better than everyone else's and they don't, and you have no rule for how you should make that decision, you're going to be in a bit of problems. Okay. I really want specific. So specifics, I should be more specific about how I pronounce that word. So if you just said, we're going to have some kind of data, not good enough, right? I want to know, especially in advance, this is the time it's easy to come up with ideas. This is the time it's easy to state what your data set is and to change your mind later. But you need to pick a lane. The worst thing, and everyone figures it out the hard way, but I'm warning you in advance, this is my foreshadowing. Almost every group, or half the groups at least, will come back at the end of this thing and say, oh my God, I wish I picked a lane sooner. Because they will put off making those hard decisions until they try to code it. And then they will code it and have to undo their code, and then code it and undo their code. And then they will end up spinning their wheels at the 30-quarter point of the course. Versus pick your data, pick who your users are, pick a goal, pick something very, very specific. We're picking something very specific and then building based on that. We have a particular data set, a particular use case, and now you're implementing that. You are not just solving things for everybody in the world or anything like that. You're not trying to educate the entire world with a data visualization. It's not happening. That, I don't think that was anyone's idea. That's why I said it. So specifics also are what I'm looking for. If you give me some vague thing like it should be user friendly, okay, you define user friendly for me, and I will be more than happy to accept that. But until you do, and you give me some quantifiable data, how I measure user friendliness is an overly used term that just is vague and means nothing really, right? I can't judge something based on user friendly. I can say it's 50% more effective, or it is a more efficient way of more efficient way of finding a particular data set or finding a pattern in the data set. That I can quantify. But user friendly, I don't know what the heck that's going to actually mean. Less frustrating to use. Well, then I have to measure frustration, but okay, I can do that. If you can measure it, then, or at least have something that's like a concrete definition, then I can go with that. But user friendliness, or it's going to be useful. What does useful mean? Tell me what's used for then. If I know what it's used for, then I can say what's useful. And if you don't judge your stuff, I will. As in, if you throw something out there, and you're not, weeding it out first, I will. And that's sounding. I probably don't need to threaten or warn you guys, because many of you guys took my 1400 class, so maybe you're already predisposed to being scared of me or something like that. I'm not trying to be scary at all. I'm just trying to say where the lines are. And people worry about the technology. They're worried about like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to program this thing. I'm like, The task is solving a problem for people using a visualization. Therefore, I need to know the visualization. I need to know the people. I need to know the task. I need you doing a best attempt at the implementation of this thing. But it is not a programming class. The programming is part of that process, but it is not the emphasis is not the focus. It is part of the process, much like the user evaluation is part of that process. You can't skimp on that either, right? They're all important. Okay. So that's my P1 feedback, which is right now, I want to make sure when I give you back your feedback, some of you were very specific, and I was like, or I started going like, that's not specific. And then like a paragraph later, I'm like, oh, specific, scratch, right? Some of it was fantastic. So keep going, just letting you know what the expectation is. I'm expecting you to argue. I'm expecting you to come up with something specific for each time. And it's not something you throw together just beforehand. Because when you do the final project, it's going to hurt like hell if you don't have all the specifics down beforehand. Okay. You'll also notice that your grade keeps on going down. I start off nice and I go down. P2 is coming soon. So let me know if there's anything about that. But that requires us talking about task analysis. Was there something about homework 2? I don't think people said there was nothing wrong with homework 2 afterwards, but I want to make sure. Is there anything with homework 2 that people had needed clarification with? And then we'll move on to other things. Oh, and by the way, the title here is how I start every D&D adventure with my boys. So in case you're wondering, I'm nerding out here. So is there anything about homework 2 that you want a clarification for? I'm more than happy to hit in the labs or do it now. Okay, I'm going to move on just in case, but maybe half of you were asleep or ran away after me doing that little rant. So hopefully not. So I don't think it was ever due this coming Tuesday at all. I just double checked my schedule on that one. And if it is written down there, the course outline says something else. I think it's a week afterwards. So it's not this coming Tuesday, it's a week afterwards. Good question, Kara. Yeah, because we have to do task analysis, which involves the interview, which is next Thursday. Oh yeah, so no, lab 2, like today is Tableau, then it's the interview, then it's the D3 coding part. So yeah, you guys got time before you have to code anything. I was rushing this D3 lab code way too early. Okay, so yeah, you should be fine. And it's also in the, I double checked the schedule to make sure it made sense. But I panicked last week or on Tuesday, I gotta say. We did this last time around, and so let's see if I can pull up an example here. Sorry if I'm embarrassing anyone. That's another fact member. Okay, so let's grab some rent. Let's pull up Will's thing, and we'll grab somebody else's stuff as well. Random. And I'm closing my eyes, and I don't know what that was. Hopefully something, a different document. And okay. Random. Hopefully this will load in some non-glacial time. I don't know why they don't have a PDF reader in Drive. Okay. Yuchen. So who's the entire audience? So let me also, I don't know if the visualization in front of me here. Let's just remind people what we're looking at. Okay, yeah. There we go. The declassified documents, not declassified documents. There's always people that are confused by this. Why? Because I get confused with it. Even after seeing this so many times, there's still things that people go, what about this? And I go, oh, I didn't notice that in the diagram. So yeah, if you're confused at all, that's perfectly normal. That's okay. In class next week. Okay. So Yuchen. Let's see what you have here. Target audience may be people interested in politics. Yep. That's what's weird about this, is that it's not specifically for politics, but readers of The Atlantic are interested in politics. They tend to be much like New York Times readers are interested in politics. Data visualization shows the number of documents that classified and declassified, right? You can be more specific if you need to. How many dimensions of data? 3, the year, pages classified, pages declassified. There's one other thing that showed, although it's overlapping with the years, but we'll talk about that in a second. Compares documents classified, declassified. So what do you get out of it? So what principles of excellence? It's bad because they use 3D. Sure. Hard to understand. Sure. Actually causes, because they're on 2 different axes, one's here, one's here. It's actually causing a distortion in how you read the data. 2 graphs, yep, would using the same y-axis, that would be wonderful. Or actually 2 different y-axis, same x-axis, right? The same year, 2 different y-axis, because the number of pages classified, pages and documents declassified. The number of documents versus the number of pages, they're different dimensions even. But yep, that would be a nice workaround. The design has 2 different data visualization. Is very informative. I don't like the 3D effect. Absolutely. The chart chunks sort of make sense because it's a pile of documents, but you could make a 2D bar and put little slashes in it. I know it's extra cruft, it's chart junk, but you could, if you wanted to really clearly say these are pages, you can make it look like a stack of paper if you wanted to. All right. Left-leaning political wongs. Yep. Docs classified, docs declassified, minimum 2, at least 4. Yeah. Which president was the fourth dimension, which is part of the years, but it's really nice as a supplemental thing to say, like, hey, by the way, this time period, because what you want is like Clinton was declassifying all these documents, Reagan was classifying documents, right? You sort of want, it's not just based on year, because it's going to look really strange. If you put down, if you overlay Clinton, you go, oh, that's why that happened. There's some things Clinton did not do well, but he seemed to be open to transparency, especially in the early years. Several task comparisons, evaluations, number of classified documents, number of pages declassified, and the president. So the presidential, how do presidential policies affect the number of classified versus declassified documents, for example? I'll get rid of the paper stacks and I'll repeat the data shown on the bar chart. Yep, to avoid the conclusion. Nice. I meant for all you guys to talk, but most of your comments are sufficiently elaborate that I don't need to necessarily do that. Did I get you Chin twice? Okay. Oh, nice. Loving it, by the way. So that is a nice redraw of the visualization, by the way. Now, if you want, what would probably be nice would be you're having Clinton in the area, but what they did with the colored bar areas to demarcate it, if you did a very subtle color difference, which is hard to do on a piece of paper, but that would probably help, because when you see Clinton, you go like, hey, that's great for Clinton. What years were Clinton again? Right. For most people, after a period of time, when was Reagan elected? I don't know how many of you know that off the top of your head. Maybe many of you. He does that. Yeah, you can look it up, I guess. But 1980, right? 80 to 88. It is sort of the 1980s, all that neon and all that kind of all the stuff that I grew up with, that is defined by Ronald Reagan. And 1984, born in the USA, and that's different eras, but yeah, Reagan's 1980s. But would people remember, not off the top of their head, 82 versus 80? It's kind of hard to remember. George W. Bush, when was he? That's probably a bit more easy to remember one because of the whole hanging Chad thing. But it would help people see that connection a lot more easily, right? You're trying to make it slap in the face obvious. And so just a little thing of where the banding, where which president was in power at what time, would probably be useful. But this is great. Very nice. Oh, well, a bunch of you did it, but still, I like it. There's 3 dimensions. Yeah, you could say 3 dimensions, but you also have the president, which is the 4th one. And so we're going to take, by the way, we're going to look at your thing. If it might be better, by the way, if you're working as a group, which all 4, put your names at the top to make sure that when the TA looks at who submitted what, it's faster to read. So you don't accidentally don't get credit for it. You should get credit for it, but just on the off chance, putting your names at the top would help. Okay. Data collection personnel of the government. So is it the government, though? The government's not using this. This is in a magazine called The Atlantic. The target audience are predominantly left-leaning people reading this, and they're presumably, or at least traditionally, they're sort of upper middle class, very, very well educated. The people that go to Harvard and are still Democrats read The Atlantic, kind of thing. It's not always the case. That's a gross generalization, but the people that read the New York Times are very different than the people that read the New York Post, for example, right? The people that read the National Post, the Globe and Mail, let's say, versus the people that read Maclean's, very different demographics of people. And the people that read a Twitter feed instead of Maclean's or the National Post are a very different demographic. You need to know who your audience is to know how to target things. So we have one group that's looking at environmental concerns. And one of my pieces of feedback is, if you're looking at environmental concerns, who's your audience? Are you trying to convert somebody? That's very different than someone that's actively trying to change their environmental impact. They're actively, they're going to demonstrations, that sort of thing. And in that case, they're looking for lack of a better term, ammunition, not literally, but they're looking for factoids, bits of information that they can share with others to try and convince other people. But you're not convincing them. You're preaching to the choir at that point in time. You're providing information to help them make an argument or to help solidify their thoughts, but you're not converting them to becoming environmentalists. They are already there. You might be people that are on the verge, that are thinking about becoming more environmentally conscious. That's a different group. And they're not going to go hunting for environmental visualizations. So knowing who your target audience tells you how you approach the situation. And they're very different. All right. That's fantastic. Do we have another one? Or unless I already have this one. Not necessarily American citizens, but predominantly American citizens. Not all American citizens, right? If you were at the riot at the White House, not the White House, at the Capitol building 2 weeks ago, you were not reading the Atlantic. That's presuming, right? It's that's not always true for these things, but that's a pretty safe bet most of the time. Right? So it's not just everybody. It's people that are reading the Atlantic, or people that are trying to make fun of the Atlantic if it ever got out the wrong way. Possibly color. Color is not being used in the colors for the different bars, but that's different dimensions. I wouldn't use color. I wouldn't see colors being used at all. Dimensions, position, length. Yep. So you would have color for the presidency, though. So you are using color. You're right. You're looking at what maybe classification versus declassification per year, but most likely what the presidential policies are. Like, when you look at this, what's your takeaway from this? Did you find anything of it useful? Large data is coherent, makes the user think, but think about what, right? Again, specifics. What are you thinking about when you see this? And I don't know if the z-axis right away. Yeah, great. What makes you confused? If you get confused, blame other people. Not always, but if you're being confused by this, it means there's a possibility that they're not doing things the right way. And why is it confusing you? Because you're having trouble with the two different axes of information. And if they merge the axes and made two different graphs or overlaid on top of each other, you'd be more likely to understand it. Okay, difficult for me to understand at first. Yep. And I answered at West. I understood the chart. I personally didn't comprehend their data right away. Yeah, then there's something wrong with what they did. But it might be my own fault, not the visualization. No, blame the visualization. Sometimes you expect to have to learn, but yeah, blame the visualizations. Nothing turned me off of it. Yeah, that's all of it perfectly fine. You don't have to love every visualization you see, but if you have to spend 20 minutes understanding what the hell they're trying to get across, and it's supposed to be something for the average everyday person, they missed the mark. If it's meant for biologists analyzing genetic sequences and you don't see it right away, okay, that could just be you don't have the domain knowledge. But if this is meant for a general audience of people reading the Atlantic, you should understand it right away. Otherwise, they did it wrong. Period. Right? Depending on the audience, it tells you also how much, how complicated this thing should be, and how much training you might need. Very nice, by the way, guys. I love that. All right. By the way, if you wanted another example, we're not doing this right now. This is a real stinker as well, right? This isn't, I don't even remember where it's actually from, but this is the client's cut from the agency service type. So child welfare, employee training, blah, 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 blah. And what do you see about this? What's your takeaway? What do you not like, and what did you like? I would say it's terrible. it's terrible on a whole bunch of different levels. But why is it terrible? And the question is, when you're looking at this, what's your takeaway? How long does it take you to get that takeaway? And that should tell you something. So they have some things like, for example, you're changing colors slightly between this bar, this group, and this group. And therefore, although they're both red, one's a darker red than the other one. So you can actually see the banding. You can see this, then this, then this, then this, not just one big giant clump. You can get a rough pointillization approach, but this is 100 people per human silhouette. And so how many human silhouettes are there? I don't know, a lot, but I can't tell you an exact number, and I can't compare this one to this one, because although we are, what mark are we using, by the way? I'd say we're using a point. It's a human silhouette, but it's the shape of the point. You have a whole bunch of points and you're counting the points. The position in space, there is a position in space, which bar or which group you are, and the x-axis, but on the y-axis, it means nothing at all. It's a pointillization task. It's how many, the point estimate on this. No, we're not doing that as the in-class activity today. I have another one, but I'm just going over another example. I'm walking through it myself. Good question. Right. So how would you want to redesign this thing? Well, first of all, I'd align this stuff. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be using the number of people as the data point, right? I'd just use a bar, like stick with a bar. You know, it works. You know, they're aligned properly. I sure as heck wouldn't have this little whoopie-doo dog's leg crap in here, right? There should, like, if I do this, now I'm not estimating this to this because they're not the same shape. They're all the exact same length, which there's no point. We're really good at judging length. That's what we're good at. That leads us to marks and channels again. We're really good at judging length, and this thing gives you different widths, same length. So it flies in the face of what we're good at judging. It's fighting your visual processing system. We're good at length. Put it in length. Keep it a whole bunch of bars. Each one of these things is a bar. That's fine. Heck, you could do this still. If you wanted to, you could do the same silhouette thing and just sort of have a bar outlining there outside of it, and just sort of cut off on a certain, like the arm or something like that. Yeah, that is a great point, Tori. They're trying to humanize this, and that is a great thing to do. But they missed the point in how people actually perceive the data. So you could put all these little like a paper dolls thing, right? A paper doll thing across the way, and then just cut off the paper dolls at some point in time. But then you could estimate the number of people, and then you could say like, okay, this is 500 people per paper doll, or something along those lines. You could redesign this in a wide variety of different ways. But at the same time, they still have to give you the exact number, because there's no way in heck you're actually reading this number. This is just sort of filling up space and giving you a rough approximate, but you're not actually comparing those differences. So mental health is huge compared to the others. I think this might actually be ordered. Yes, it is. It is ordered, and that's at least a good thing. One of the problems you're going to find for really bad visualizations is finding good things. There's always good, there's always bad. There's no perfect visualization, and they're not all 100% garbage. So the good thing is they sorted the data set from smallest to largest to help you get a sense of the data. That's fine, right? They could have done it based off alphabetical order. But then do you remember the name of, child education versus alcohol and substance abuse is just substance abuse under S, right? So putting it in order of the size sort of makes sense. That's fine. It's reasonable in this case. And so there are, what would we call them? Do they have, what is it? We had principles of excellence. I don't use that term very often. That's why I'm making fun of myself here. Principles of excellence in this thing. Yeah, there are some things that they did well. Okay. I want to move on to this thing here. We'll see how far we get here. I'm going to go back one, because we were talking about pie charts and my dislike of pie charts. And people will still give me, I still had grad students give me pie charts. I think they just wanted to see if I would, freak out. Because we were talking about, marks, channels, And then we talked about there are some times when certain channels are easier to read than others. We just saw that with those those people points, right? Some things are easier to read than others. And so the length of a bar is a lot easier to read than a lot of the other stuff. Position on a scale, easy to read. Align, if the scales are not aligned, harder to read. The length is hard to read unless they're aligned. It's still readable though. Angle, we're pretty terrible at. The difference between 39 and 40 degrees, I can't see it. I'm assuming you can't see it. You can see 20 to 40, but you can't see like some minuscule little amount. Direction and angle are almost going to be identical to each other. It just happens it's 1984. They didn't know that at the time. The area of something, we're really terrible at seeing this. We see big versus small. We don't see it's 27% larger. And volume is even worse. It's a two-dimensional thing that we're pretending is 3D, and you are inferring that. We are terrible at seeing that. Amount of curvature, still also pretty terrible. And shading, again, terrible. This shading is really good for categories of information. Nixon versus Ford versus Carter versus Reagan. You can see it based on the shading, but you can't see like, oh, it's 30% more shaded. We see things, we don't see things in the mechanical way that computer scientists and everyone else seems to want to think. It's actually hard for us to see certain things and really easy for us to see other things. They're based on, we're going to look at this in terms of perception later on. It's based on evolutionary biology. It's based on how we see the world and how we've processed things. And if you're fighting your visual processing system, you're doing it wrong. Because what the whole point of this field is, take advantage of what we're good at. We're good at some things, not everything. In case people are not reading the chat, overall we're bad at almost everything. Yeah, yes and no. We still smoke a computer when it comes to high level cognition. The computers are actually, I think they just surpassed us for object recognition for many things. Human faces, also even human faces, but we do it naturally versus they have to train themselves. It's a big thing. Like, you are conscious. So when you're talking about Jeopardy, for example, and Watson on Jeopardy, they gave the text to Watson in advance and then let it read the text and do internet searches, not have that knowledge on hand, not internet search, but they searched large databases of information. If you had an army of people that could look at things in advance, yeah, you'd be winning Jeopardy too, right? It sort of a false equivalence. They, just like we're not great, we might think we're not great at doing mathematical calculations or chess, but in fact, well, chess, we're actually pretty good about it. The chess playing machines are actually designed to beat particular chess players and to have a lookup for a book. So if you had an army of people looking up all the possible strategies at a given chess position, yeah, again, we'd be pretty good. Turns out the best way to win a chess, or at least it was a couple of years ago, was to have a pretty good chess player or great chess player, but fantastic chess player, not so great. Fantastic chess playing machine, not so great. The best combination was okay chess player and okay machine learning algorithm, or okay chess playing computer to give you suggestions. That actually got you the most bang for your buck, which is kind of weird. We are very good at some things. We just think we're either terrible at everything and are fantastic at everything. That's not actually true in either case. We don't have little, cameras in our eyes, but our eyes are really good at picking out little minuscule details, which is why Polar Express pisses us off so much. We are really good at seeing human faces, like phenomenally good at it, to the point that we get physically angry when it doesn't quite look right. In case you're wondering, right? We're really good at, I can pick up music patterns better than, like, it's weird. The rest of my family doesn't see it. And I'm like, why are you humming this particular song? They're like, how did you know that I was singing that song? I'm really good at that sort of thing, right? There are some things we're good at, and we should be leaning into that. I was on a tangent, sorry. So one of the things we should be leaning into is we're really good at distinguishing the distance between this and this. We're terrible over this way as an angle. So we design things based off of what we need to see. So if we're doing this particular ordering, I want to make sure that, and we're doing this measurement, we're really bad at a pie chart, for example. If we're trying to do length and they're not aligned, which is actually what they're doing with this test, unaligned data sets we're really bad at. So you put two bar charts and they put the stack them on top of each other, you can't tell. You have a really hard time. That's length on top of one another. That's what this one here, these type 4 and type 5 are. So you have your bar chart and one's here, you can't really tell. You put them aligned, you put them next to each other. Oh yeah, you can see that a mile away. And pie charts are just bad all around. Bad. Okay, bad. This is William Playfair. He invents the pie chart, but he also, this is the first example of a pie chart done by hand. But he didn't have all this experimental data, so you can't blame him that much. It's in 1801, and quite frankly, he also invented this one over here. He invented, which is an area line graph, right? All these terms, they all sort of blend together after a while. He makes the first bar chart. You can't fault the guy too much for it. He's coming up with all of these crazy things. So yeah, and doing them by hand, might I add, right? So you can't fault him too much for it, but we now know pie charts, not so good. They're fantastic if you want to see percentage of a whole and you have only a couple slices, or they're good enough at least. Fine. But if I remember having a coworker who made a 3D pie chart, this is on, like, intentionally did not know, 3D pie chart and showing total number counts. So it would be like 200, 300 and something. They didn't actually add up to 100. In fact, some of the data was normalized. Some of it was this. It was just like this gobbledygook of data thrown into a pie chart. And they're like, hey, here's some data. And you're like, what are you doing? Just give me some freaking numbers, right? If you have 60% and 40%, tell me 60% and 40%. A pie chart doesn't help me any more than that. Just give me some numbers. It takes up less space on the screen. So if we're looking at this, so we already looked at that one. Okay, fine. Here's the other ones that Cleveland and McGill were using. So if you put them right next to each other, we're amazing at this. If you put them on two different bar charts, but they're aligned with each other, pretty good. They're not right next to it. There's other distractions, but pretty good. If you have them aligned, I think this is one over here, you can still see it, even if there's a gap between and there's distractors in there. Pretty good. If you put them on different axes, different bars, and not aligned, pretty bad. And you put them on top of each other, we're terrible, or the error rate is through the roof, right? So knowing what your data is, knowing what you need to show, changes how you want to represent this thing. And in case you're wondering, here in Bostock. Here in Bostock, in case you probably see those names again later, they invented D3. They did a whole bunch of other things. Jeff here went to Stanford, got a job at Stanford. I think he may have gotten tenure at Stanford, and then his wife wanted to find a job, or got a job in Seattle. So he just went, I'm going to go to UW. So he went to two of the best schools on the planet. I'm going to go there now. Okay. He's a big name. Anyways, great public speaker, great presenter, and a great researcher on top of that. I don't know what he's like as a person, but totally he's a delightful person. But they did the same experiment. They took Cleveland and McGill's results, and then they threw it at Amazon Mechanical Turk. AMT, I think, is what most people will end up calling it. It's essentially get humans to act like a computer. Get humans to do all the heavy lifting. Amazon Mechanical Turk there's a great little, a lot of the AI researchers that I know like to point out the fact that their line of excellence is, can your $300,000 computer system and rig and setup beat a $15 hamster doing a maze? That's essentially that's the gold standard. Can you beat, well, at least it was a while ago, can you beat a $15 hamster with your $300,000 computer setup? right? Because that's sometimes sneakernet, as some people call it, is the best way to go. Sneakernet is, instead of sending it over a network, instead of sending it over the internet, instead of sending it over Ethernet, you just grab a person, you grab an intern, and you get them, $20, and you have them carry around a flash drive. Right? If you're backing up your data set, your data set, sometimes a lot of these companies will actually send you a bunch of hard drives in a van. You plug it in, you transfer everything over, you put it in and they drive the van. That's faster. Sending it like, a van full of hard drives is faster than trying to send it over a network. In this case, sometimes it's better to send people at the problem than a machine. And so the idea is you just get, you pay someone $1 or whatever the case is for answering a couple of these questions. And they do a whole bunch of these. They're called Turkers. They just answer these 2:00 in the morning kind of thing. But you can actually get the same kind of results. You just get people to judge distances and see what they get. And you get the same results as they had in 1984. So in 2010, they did this, and you're seeing the error rate for all of these different things. And look at this. This is one of my favorite things because I hate tree maps. Everyone else loves them. I hate them. A tree map is a space-filling hierarchical way of encoding data. All it's saying is, if you're trying to show a tree, you can show a tree using a bunch of squares versus that circle and a bunch of things attached to it. But we're terrible at it. If we have misaligned things, we're terrible at it. If we have bubble charts, we're terrible at judging sizes. Pie chart's slightly better than a bubble chart. But generally, discerning distances or sizes, we're not very good at this. My takeaway, though, is not this at all. I'm rambling. So first of all, in terms of positions, here are the various things we have for, these are all positions, T1 to T5, right? And this is the order in which their error rate is. So positions are really good at judging, differentiating between things in terms of position. Or the position tells you, you can measure length or size based off position, depending on how things are positioned. Angles, pretty terrible. Circular areas, even more terrible. Slightly better, but not that much better, is rectangular areas, whether they're aligned or not. They're in it, they're not necessarily aligned. But judging the size of a rectangular area, we're bad at that. So if you know this, here's the kicker. If you know all this information, if you know we're good at judging length versus rectangular area, your job is to figure out what to do here. So if I have ordered data, I have a magnitude. If I have like a, the number of declassified documents, the temperature, something like that, something that is on a continuous scale or ordinal scale. Position on the common scale is the most effective. Position on unaligned scales, second most effective. Then we start talking about length in 1D, like the length of something. Then you're talking about tilt. Then you're talking about area. It's getting worse. We're talking depth, how in 3D, how far away it is. If you're trying to encode that in 3D, pretty terrible. Color and luminance, it gets even worse. We're talking about scale, right? If I'm trying to say like this is us being able to discern the differences, we get worse if we start using color. And if we start using curvature and volume, we're terrible. Don't even bother. But let's try it a different way. What about categorical data? Is it this president or this president? Is it, are they net students or are they IMD students, right? Categorical data. We're going to look at that very soon, either today or probably not today, but maybe next time. When you're looking at the data, how, you categorize it, there's no ordering. It's not like one's better than the other. It's, you may disagree, but all right, IMD versus BMPD versus net students, they're different groups of students. They are, or different universities. You don't order them. They just are countries on a map for the same thing, categorical data. Well, it turns out space and region, that's really good as well, just like the last time. Color, hue color is fantastic for it. It is abysmal for ordered channels, but it's great for categorical data. Motion, again, crap for this, or fairly crap for this, perfectly fine for category. Shape is good for this. And we keep on getting better and better things here. Okay, do I have anything else? No, these are our best ways of encoding category. These are the best ways of encoding order. The key is this principle, the effectiveness principle, and this is from Jacques McKinley from 1986, so way back in the day, is the importance of the attribute should match the salience of the channel. Essentially, if it's something important, put it in on an important channel. If it's not important, put it on a less important channel, right? You have a limited number of channels. You have a limited number of things you can do. You have to make that choice between what's important and what's not. And so this is what I'm expecting you to apply for your thing. If it's something important that you need to let people know about, you put it on an effective channel. And the channel should match what you're showing. So the visual encoding should express all of and only the information of the data set. And there's a classic example of this being done poorly, and I cannot not see this when I look at this. So the data characteristics match the channel. Okay. So way back in idea. So my big thing is just the summary for it is you got to prioritize what channel for each attribute, what you're trying to show. You match the channel with the type of attribute, and how important it is tells you which one you should choose. So is it important? What kind of data? Those two things tell you how to design something. It's not guesswork. It's matching. You match up the channel with what's important. Otherwise, you get this. I'll leave this for you to look at for a second, because this is a beautiful example of it. I think it's an actual thing, an actual chart from way back in the day. I mean, Sweden is doing phenomenally, and the US sucks, obviously, right? Clearly, that's what the takeaway is. I cannot not see that. I see the US down here, and look at them. They're terrible cars. So is this reliability or something like that? It's 1979, reliability of US cars or something like that. Japan is not doing. I thought Japan made great cars. I don't know what's going on here, but the US cars are terrible, and French cars are doing okay. Le car is doing fine. What? Yeah, that's not actually what this is encoding. This is the cars being made in different countries. The Audi 5000 and the BMW 320 are being made in Germany. Japan is making the Subaru, the Datsun. Oh, Japan made the Datsun. Okay. The two different Datsuns and the Civic and the Accord. That's all it's saying. It's not rating them. It is saying what country the cars are coming from. And yet, when you look at this, you cannot help but see it as a rating in terms of quality or something like that, because the channel's not matching what you're looking for. Even with this, it's still suboptimal, but okay. Right? You're still seeing a bunch of shapes, they're points. You're using position to encode something that's pretty darn important, but fine. But the other way, I cannot not see it as a rating of quality or some other metric like this. I want to compare the bars. Everybody does. Even now, you almost want to compare these, but you don't, at least, because the channel's not matching. In the previous one, the channel does not match the attribute that you're showing. We're just seeing what countries make what cars. That is just a correlation between two things. It's not a rating of across different countries. And so you could have done this a whole bunch of different ways, actually. But that's what we're aiming for here. Okay. So this is already a listing. If you ever need it, this is a perfectly good lookup chart if you want to find out, like, how do I want to show this ordering effect? Well, position is really useful. Position in space is we're going to look at this again in a second, but I want to try one more time. We're going to use lecture 4, I do believe. Let's say lecture 4 instead of lecture 3. So instead of lecture 3, put in lecture 4. I want you to look at this. Now you can look at this particular website. we're going to spend just 10 minutes. Like, let's make it quick. But what is going on here? This is, it's a generalized thing, but it was originally done for code data, for code, repositories. This is going to be what they're at least showing here would be, let me see, the number of lines of code in a rectangular area, the height being the number of changes, the color being the how long it's been since those changes. So this would be a large bunch of code, but only one submission, like it wasn't changed a whole lot of times. So they wrote it, they pushed it, it didn't get changed. This got changed a whole bunch of times. This got changed recently a whole bunch of times. And you're seeing this would be a packet or package in the database, in the repository of code. So I can actually have, this is this library, this is this library, this is this library, or this is this chunk of my code, like chunks of code. If you haven't done large code repositories before, like in 1400, we do single file, and at the very end of the term, we might try 2 or 3 files, not thousands and thousands of files, like what you would actually have in real code. But this is, one of the chunks of files. This is a package of files. And this would be, let's say, an entire project with all the packages in it. Okay, so what do you think of this particular thing? So you can even look into it more, but you don't have to go crazy about this. Just based on that rough description, what's being done right? What's being done wrong? What kind of attributes are being encoded? How would you improve it? So a critique again. Now we'll do another critique. So throw it into lecture 4, and we'll, in about 10 minutes, I'll look at a couple of these. Okay, I'm going to mute myself, but I'm still around. So to be, we can't see, can you see, I should be sharing the discriminability and separability screen. Can you see that now, Tori? Okay. Hopefully that's working as well. The idea here is some things you can see, you can separate. You see your screen. Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. And I moved it over afterwards. Sorry about that. So there are times, there's a lot of juggling going on here. There are times like hue and position. I can fully separate those. So pick out all the blue circles, not a problem for you. Pick out all the circles on the right, not a problem for you, right? That it is trivial, semi-trivial at least. If I have size and hue, pick out all the large purple circles. It's a little bit harder to be able to visually just pick them out, or pick out all the large blue circles, picking all those out. It's a bit more of a challenge. Small purple circles, a little bit more of a challenge. You have to actually visually scan. In fact, when we're looking at this, we'll talk about pop-out effects. The red circles, if I say pick out the red circles, you don't even have to scan the scene. You just see them automatically. There's some interference with size and hue. Height and width, there's pretty significant interference. If I want to only find the tall circles, you would have to pick out this one, this one, this one, this one, not this one, but I want to see it, right? The 2 different dimensions collide with one another. And if I do 2 different colors at the same time, I can't do it at all. If you try and go red and brightness or darkness, it's really hard. And if you're trying to do red and green as 2 different dimensions, and you're overlapping them, you can't do it, because you see a different color when you combine the colors together. They merge. And so we will have dimensions where they either interfere with each other, or you can't, or somewhat, or a lot. And you have to, again, make that decision on whether to, which one to choose. You can't do both. There are all these compromises along the way where you say, this is the important channel. So to be fair, the channel meaning I have different marks, different ways of encoding data. So it could be a line, it could be a circle, it could be text, it could be volume, something like that. And the channel is how I manipulate that mark to encode information. So the mark here are these dots or points, and the channel would be the color is one channel, the size is another channel, the position in space, so X position and the Y position are both channels. There are ways of manipulating the mark to encode data. That makes sense, Tori? Hopefully. All right, so this is trying to use a red channel, a green channel, different amounts of red, different amounts of green to encode information. But it doesn't work, because as soon as I do that, I see a different color. Much like if I put two frequencies of sound together, you'll blend them. You'll hear a different note. If they're close enough, they'll just blend together and you won't be able to just tease them apart anymore. So this is what we're going to be looking at very, very soon. There's another problem, which is you can't just throw any two things together. Some of them don't play well together, or they play too well together, if you will. Okay. So that's what I was going to do for an in-class exercise again. Okay, yeah, groups 2, 3. We're not doing this right now. Oh, I was going to do this one, but maybe you can do this on your own if you want more practice. What's wrong with this? There's a lot wrong with this. If you want more practice, I love doing this exercise because it's a bit more obvious for what the workaround is. How would I critique this? So this is a good practice thing to make sure to get your hands dirty, redraw it, see how it works. Okay. When we come back next time, I'm going to mute my video and my microphone. I'm going to grab something to eat, actually. And when we come back in about 10 minutes, we're going to be looking at Tableau a little bit, and we're going to help you do homework too, because that's what the labs are for. Okay. So labs in 10 minutes, and I will see you all then. We'll just stay on the same Zoom meeting. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stop my share.